Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I'm just sitting here drinking my morning coffee. And I thought I would give you guys another client update. Today we're going to talk a little bit about conjugate training, how my clients feel about it, and some of the problems we have with bands. And for those of you who like these type of videos, please remember to click like down below. One of the things people frequently notice and ask questions about, please stop asking. You guys all know there's dislike bots. Yes, this video will get an enormous number of dislikes, all within a very, very tiny time frame. And it's because there's a person sitting there who wakes up, goes over the dislike bot, logs in with 30, 40 accounts, and just has them dislike it down the road. So for those of you who like these videos, please remember to click like down below. If you're a regular viewer, just click the like. It would be greatly appreciated. But over to the point, conjugate training, bands, all of that. I try to get most of my clients in the direction of conjugate. Because it's what I use. I legitimately believe at this point in the game, having messed with every system that's out there, observed stuff, I really feel at this point the evidence is that conjugate is the best all-around way to train. And notice I didn't say for powerlifting, I didn't state a goal, I stated it's all around the best way to train. And you can customize it towards your specific goals. And it's a proven system, it works extremely well for pretty much any sport, any endeavor you want to do for your weight training. So that's the direction I tend to take my clients in, but obviously not everybody is ready. Not everyone is ready for a number of reasons to run a system like that. And right now, it's something like a third of my clients use it, and by the end of the year, it'll be half. I've already got it scheduled with people. We know when they're going to start it. And I mean, in a perfect world, I would love if all of my clients ran it, but that's probably not ever going to be feasible. At least unless I get people to the point to where I'm sitting here with just a big group of clients who want to do conjugate. But realistically, I'll probably not have all of my clients on it. So we usually run a combination of either linear progression, because let's come over to the other point. If a person is capable of making linear progress, why wouldn't you? Okay, there shouldn't be any periodization involved with a person who's capable of making linear progress. And that could be someone who was an advanced lifter who didn't train for 6 weeks. Which is actually perfect examples. I've had two of those already, guys who already had well over 400 deadlifts and things like that, right? Who couldn't train for a number of weeks. They detrained. Put them back on linear progression. It doesn't make sense to do anything else if a person can make linear progress. It's silly not to. We do that. We do usually or concurrent periodization, but I only take someone to concurrent periodization with the goal of eventually transitioning them into conjugate. And I'm not going to give in this video what my tests are, but I use the concurrent training to determine if someone has the aptitude or they're ready to run conjugate yet. And I'm not going to give it my tips are, but basically it's to see if they can follow my instructions. And it's kind of a pass-fail thing. But people who deviate from my plan, even 1%, I won't put on conjugate, right? So that would be a giveaway. Basically, if you ever tell me you did anything other than what I gave you on your spreadsheet in any given workout, you're not going to do conjugate. But certain stuff in there is to test their mindset. Because I put things in training that some of my clients, they don't always like, they don't always want to do. And people say, what do you mean? Because no, it's because it's too easy. It's not because it's too hard. It's because they feel like it's a waste of time, that it's not doing anything beneficial to them. Because that's the other thing I've noticed is that there's a common trend in people who come over to me who have stalled for a year straight. They haven't gained any strength in a year, right? That's a common trend in clients, but they think everything needs to be a limit set. In their mind, anything that's not RPE 9 or RPE 10 was a complete waste of effort. There should never be any set of anything that isn't. And so to them, the nuancedness of adding any training volume to something that isn't extremely difficult or to do speed work and things like that is a foreign concept to a lot of those people. So you have to get people into the mindset of understanding that not every single set that you do in the gym is not a limit set. You know, you can do sets where you don't grind so hard that the form completely breaks down. But that's definitely one of the different tests I run with people to kind of see where they're at with their mindset, to see if they can grasp certain concepts or not. Because otherwise, those are the people who can't follow that. Those people will mess up their speed work. Their dynamic work is not going to work. They're not going to be able to do it correctly. because they will start changing their own weights and everything else. Even though you'll prescribe them numbers, they'll start changing it. So I have a lot of little things that I put people through to see if they're in the mindset to run it. But the people who do normal concurrent training, they get good results also. Definitely been some very successful recomps, plenty of strength gains, people hitting lifetime PRs. But as far as my conjugate guys go, they actually do love it. We do see, just like you guys have watched me see pretty good PRs. You've watched me recomposition everything else with my own conjugate training. Well, the same thing applies to my clients who are less advanced than me. So if you take clients who are dramatically weaker than I am and younger, you take someone in their 20s who has less muscle and more body fat percentage than I have in their 20s, and you put them on conjugate, they recomposition like crazy, which makes sense. It is generally the best way to train. And so obviously when it's guided and they're under coaching, they're going to tend to make phenomenal progress. And it's not just their strength, it's their physiques and body composition. It happens pretty rapidly, and most of those guys realize it and they notice it very, very quickly. So they're usually really happy with the results they get. Also, people who are coming to me are generally wanting to get stronger. No one is coming to me saying, Jason turned me into a men's physique competitor. People are generally coming to me because they want to get stronger, they want to get more jacked with a focus on strength, or they want to get better at some sport that they compete in. And they need the strength training to do so. And that's the other thing. I actually have people who do contact sports and martial arts. They're in my clients. And even those clients laugh at this whole conversation that everyone had when I was talking about all this stuff with kicking and everything else. They basically think that everyone else who is making the arguments against me is an idiot because they hired me as a coach, as a martial artist, to help them get more speed and power and strength. And it works. So to even those clients, that whole argument was ludicrous and laughable, and it makes people who, again, people who understand that strength applies to contact sports. Anyone who's arguing against it, it makes you look stupid. And that's the context that people lost, and they don't understand that I do coach clients specifically who hired me as their strength coach to get better at their martial arts. So again, something, a context that people lost with those other videos. But the conjugate works great for that. And clients have been generally impressed with it who've done it, with the results they get on it. The problem is bands. Bands has been one of the biggest problems, and I blame band manufacturers. I blame band manufacturers for not putting out good information on their product. I think in my experience, the companies, even the good companies that make bands, they generally expect that people know what they're doing with the bands when they sell them. And for me, that's been the hardest part, is clients have struggling to get bands connected. That's why I'm having to make tutorial videos, and this also tells me that I need to make a lot more videos about bands. Now, the problem I have is that I'm not going to be able to discuss any brand of band other than what I use, and I use Rogue. And one of the problems I had is that even the people who answer the phone at Rogue, this will probably get back to them, someone will probably link on this video, the people on the phone don't actually know what they're talking about. Because I'm someone who has a full set of Rogue bands. I hook them up on a Rogue rack using Rogue equipment, and I measure them myself with digital scales. Okay. Rogue's advertised weights for their bands assume that you pull them to pretty much peak tension, and it's the sets combined. So in other words, they list the blue bands at 50 pounds. In my experience, if you come over and you start with a band pulled to where there's just a tiny bit of slack at the bottom of a squat, and you stretch it out when it's set up into a Rogue rack, and you stretch it out to the top of a squat, a blue band, which is listed as 50 pounds, is about 25, anywhere from 24 up to about 26 pounds of tension per side, right? When you take it up high enough to where it's going to be up to where someone is squatting to. So there's some people who are average height. And even if you pull it further, people say, well, maybe that's meant for someone who's 6'5". Well, if you pull it up another 6 inches further, so if I take the band and I pull it up to where it's pulled up 6 feet into the air, which would be where maybe a 6'5" guy's shoulder is, it only goes up a pound or two, right? It goes up maybe 1 pound, maybe goes to 26 pounds. But I've had one of my guys, is a perfect example. One of my clients has called them because he got really confused about it, and he called them directly, and the person over the phone at Rogue told him, no, that's per band. And so then I have to argue with a client when I'm like, I measured it myself, go buy a digital scale and measure it. It is not 50 pounds per band, it's 50 pounds per set. So the entire set of blue bands, if you hook one on each side and you pull them to the appropriate stretch, you're going to have about 50 pounds of band tension extra at the heaviest point. All right, that's per set, not per band. A lot of the companies aren't advertising this particularly well. And it's not just Rogue, it's everybody. Which is one reason that in my case for my clients, I tell my clients to only buy Rogue bands because I can measure them. I can determine myself how much tension they have on those bands. Now, the funny thing is that really only matters for speed work. People would say, well, what do you mean? It doesn't matter to other stuff. No, it doesn't matter to other stuff at all. Because when you're doing conjugate training, you don't need to know exactly how much band tension you have for max lifts, right? You only need to know that you use the same bands every time you repeat that version. In other words, you could just skip completely the knowledge of how much tension is on a blue band. As long as you do blue bands every time you're set to rotate that max lift in with blue bands and you use the same set of bands, doesn't matter how much is on it. Your PR is your PR, right? Because on conjugate, you have a set of lifts that you do that you try to PR. As long as they're consistent so that you just know if that version of the lift, whether with that barbell, with that set of bands, with that set of chains, even if you don't know what they weigh, it doesn't matter because a PR is a PR as long as you're consistently going up on it every time you do it, every 6 weeks, every 12 weeks, whatever. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter that much. For the speed work, it matters. For the speed work, it matters. And that's been the hardest part for people is learning to understand the bands. Learning to understand the bands. And they're confusing for people. And once you teach people bands are easy, the funny part for me is that once you understand how to use bands, you learn how to set them up, you learn how to interpret all the stuff with the bands, they're really intuitive and easy. But for people who've never used them before, and particularly some of my clients, bands are very confusing. Trying to figure out how to set them up is hard for people. Learning how to get the slack out at different points, especially if you don't have the proper equipment. Bands can really be a nightmare for people who are new to using them. And it really doesn't have to be that way. And it's unfortunate because bands are one of the most valuable training tools we have. Like if there's something that you want to add as supplemental work of any type to enhance your normal free weight barbell training, messing with bands is probably the best thing you could possibly do. Like if you were to kind of be like, if you were to just take every machine and cable out of a gym and just teach people how to use bands correctly, what would be better? I would say, well, the bands would be better. They're more versatile. They bring more to the table. You get more benefits from all that other stuff. If you need to do something besides a barbell, just a barbell or various specialty bars, working with bands is usually your next thing. So they bring a lot to the table. The problem is they're confusing to people because there's a very limited number of people use bands regularly. A limited number of people do it, and there isn't as big of a culture in mainstream training around it, so people don't understand bands. So there's a big learning curve in learning to use them, and once you learn how to use them, they become easy. But there's a lot of confusion regarding the tension of bands. There's a lot of confusion regarding how to set bands up. And unfortunately, a lot of gyms aren't equipped for it, so you have to come up with ways for people to do it. And then what you end up finding is that you get clients who, when you try to instruct them on how to do it, you make videos, you explain it, they go try to come up with their own system, and then they can't get the slack out of the bands and stuff because they did something different than what you've already kind of engineered for them. They say, well, this seems easier, and then it doesn't work. And then kind of go back to the drawing board. So bands really kind of create a lot of confusion for people, and it's unfortunate. So I've realized moving forward, I probably need to discuss bands more. Mainly because it doesn't matter what you're doing with your training. Bands bring a lot to the table. They bring a lot to the table. They bring a whole new dynamic and training element over barbell work towards any goal that you could possibly have for training. I don't care whether it's hypertrophy with smaller exercises. I don't care if it's for speed work. I don't care if it's for various heavy work. Bands bring a lot to the table. And really, I've reached a point to where I think anyone who can use bands, who can figure out how to use bands, probably needs to be training with bands, right? And the problem is you can't write cookie cutter programs with bands because everybody doesn't have them. Everyone should have them. They're cheap. You can put them in your gym bag. There's no excuse not to have them. It's the fact that people just don't have them, and I think it's really a detriment. But what we do need is better resources from the companies that make bands. They really and truly need to put better resources into showing people how to use them, more accurate ways to measure how they work, things like that. Because, again, they just throw charts at people that aren't always explained properly. People really need better tutorials, and that might be something I work towards myself. And that would probably help people a lot and help more of my clients and everything else, because it seems like with each client who I take them over to band work, we run through a whole process and a lot of problems and stuff that we have to correct and teach them about bands. And then once you learn how to use bands, they're so easy that you laugh at it. Like once you've learned how to use them, the fact that you had any problems with them ever will make you laugh at yourself, because they really are simple. It's just that they seem more complicated than they are. And a lot of it's just due to lack of information. But all in all, I will say, though, that my clients who run Conjugate, they've been very, very happy with it. And for me, like I said, in the long term, that's the direction I think I would like to take most of my clients. And I even would say to people out there, I would say to most of you out there, if you're really serious about your training goals, you should consider this system yourself, right? You should consider this system yourself. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.